We're living our truth now. Krista, what?
Krista who?
Christadelphian?
Did you say Christian Dolphin? So are you from Philadelphia?
Welcome to the Life After Leaving Podcast, an ex-Christadelphian podcast.
Hello, heathens, and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Zinnia. Today's guest is Mike. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Zinnia. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Thank you.
All right. So today I'd like to hear your story of becoming an ex-Christadelphian. So we'll be going through your experience as a Christadelphian, what the process of leaving looked like for you, where you're at now in life, and anything you'd want to share with people who may be going through a similar journey. Before we get started, can you share what part of the world you're based in?
Yeah, so I'm in Birmingham, which is kind of in the centre of England.
Wonderful. Welcome. You're the first person on the podcast from that region. And how long has it been since you've left?
Right. It was 2001. So what's that? 23 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's been a long time.
A while. Yeah.
All right. So let's get started with your origins. Were you born a Christadelphian into a Christadelphian family?
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of.
It's complicated. So yes, I was basically. My grandparents were all Christadelphians. My parents at the time I was born were Christadelphians, and we were based at the Watford Ecclesia, which is a town just north of London, which is where we lived at the time. And as we'll perhaps uncover, the story got a little bit more complicated, but originally, yes, I was born into it, going along to Sunday school at Watford from a very early age.
Okay. That sounds like pretty much the standard thing for most of the people who've been on the podcast so far, so that makes sense. And how would you describe your home ecclesia?
At that point, because we moved when I was 11, so my memories of Watford were very much kind of childhood memories. You know, it was good. It was all I knew. I went to Sunday school and I went to the youth group on a Friday. We had fun there. I enjoyed that. One lingering memory, I remember at Sunday school the one time I got in trouble because I'd got a toy BA Baracus from the A-team that I'd taken with me, and I got into trouble for that, but I don't know why that sticks in the mind. And I also remember playing Issachar in the story of Joseph in the Sunday school play, which I had about 2 lines, and my older sister was the narrator, who obviously had a lot of lines being the narrator, so I was quite cross about that. But other than that, it was nice, it was good. But what happened as when I was 11, we moved to Birmingham. Round about that time, sort of in the year or two leading up to that time, Mum and Dad had been exploring other options and looking in particular at Baptist churches, because I think it's fair to say that as a family we were always kind of more on the let's say left wing of Christadelphia, and at that point they were looking at that, and then the move came about with my dad's job, and we moved up here, which is about 100 miles away. I know in America, like 100 miles is nothing, is it? Your next door neighbour's probably 100 miles away, but over here it's like quite a big deal. So that was, big kind of uprooting, and because it coincided with the uncertainty, there was a period of me not going while Mum and Dad were exploring things up here, and in the end they went their separate ways. Mum decided to stick with being a Christadelphian, and Dad joined a local Baptist church.
Wow, that's unusual.
Stayed together as a family, but
good to clarify.
Churches. And so we were kind of left with the option.
Make a choice.
And my older sister went to the Baptist church with Dad, and my younger sister and I went to the Christadelphian church. So we'd settled in an ecclesia called Shirley, which was a village not far from where we live, and that was kind of the ecclesia that I grew up in, so to speak.
Yeah, and once you're in the more formative years where you're learning about the theology and being more active. Was there anything you remember for why you chose to keep going to the Christadelphian ecclesia rather than a Baptist church?
Yeah, there was nothing terribly deep about that for any of the three of us. I don't think it's just where we kind of made the connections when we visited. So my sister obviously found some people that she gelled with in the Baptist church. I mean, my younger sister was, what was she, 5 or 6 at the
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And, I'd like to think she stayed with Christadelphians because her cool big brother was there, but I'm sure she would tell you that that's not the case. So yeah, for me again, I connected with a couple of people, and that was it at that stage.
Okay, I guess that makes sense because a lot of people bring up the social aspect. So if they did have friends, that was a strong part of why they stayed and what they enjoyed about it typically.
Yeah, that was a really big part, and but I for a while, I suppose when I was kind of 12 to 13, I wasn't very keen on going at all. And my mum insisted that I do at least Sunday school. So I was doing that as a compromise, as a bare minimum. But I wasn't going along to any of the other things. And, it was a bit of a pain having to go to that. But to keep the peace, it was. I wasn't like a stroppy teenager, so yeah, go along with it. And then I don't know, one Friday, because there was obviously all the Sunday activities, and then there was Friday CYC as they called it, which was the
Yep.
the youth group that met kind of everyone from I don't know 6 years to 20 years was kind of getting together on a Friday
Oh, wow.
evening.
Yours started really young. Ours started when you were more like an adolescent age. I think you would start going.
There were two separate ones. So there was
Oh, okay, like a
a
junior
junior one
one?
and a senior one. I
Okay.
think at 11 you were eligible for the older one. And
Okay.
of course you're there at 11 with like young adults. It's potentially a little bit intimidating. Like some of the people that you think are so cool, and actually you think about it later in life, you weren't cool at all. But
Well, when you realize it's going to a religious Friday night event, you're like, wasn't that cool?
yeah. So one Friday when I was probably about 13, I don't know, to this day, I don't know why, but I just thought to myself, do you know what? I'll go to CYC. And there was a lad there who obviously I knew through Sunday school, but didn't know well because I wasn't doing the other activities. And he was so welcoming. And I think that's something that I'd like to get across in this, where this conversation might go. I wouldn't want it to come across that I'm anti-Christadelphian. I got to know and met an awful lot of really, really wonderful people who, some of whom I'm still in touch with, some of whom I miss. But, a lot of people were very, very good to me at different stages. And so there's a lot of good memories in among the nonsense that we'll talk about. But so this lad was really welcoming, and I just started going and built it up from there, and then that became my social life, and I grew to love it. I grew to love going there, to love to look forward. Everyone looks forward to the weekends, but I was counting the days to the weekends when I'd be around these people again, and it was far more the social aspect than anything else. But at that period, sort of 13 to 16, was cracking. It was really good. So I enjoyed that.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. You're always welcome to share positive experiences here. For most people, it's a mixed bag. Some more positive than others, some more negative than others, but we definitely have featured a spectrum of stories here. But that's interesting to hear about how that changed from being kind of more apathetic towards it to getting into it because of the socializing. And did you guys do like fun activities afterwards? Because I know sometimes at my CYC, some of the kids would go out and play sports afterwards or like do activities and go get a treat somewhere or something. So sometimes it can be more socializing heavy even than like theology stuff.
Yeah. I wish I could say that we'd done lots of sports, because I'm really, really into my sports. And, I grew up as a big, I'm going to say football fan. I mean soccer.
Thank you for us
to
Americans
you.
who are like, what?
But I grew up as a massive fan, not very good at playing it, but yeah, so I love watching my football. But there wasn't a lot of that to connect with. There weren't many people that were terribly into that. But what we did have right round the corner from that meeting room was Burger King.
Well, there's some American tradition right there.
So a lot of times we would finish the evening meeting on a Sunday and pop round to Burger King for a double whopper. At one stage there was a competition to see who could eat a double whopper in the fewest number of bites, but
Ew.
yeah, I didn't win that. I think somebody did it in 4
That's
bites
okay.
at one stage.
Oof.
Nice. But so the social bit around that, the meeting, obviously the memorial service, 11 o'clock in the morning on Sunday,
Mhm.
and then the evening lecture at 6:30. And after that, via Burger King or whatever, we would find ourselves at someone's house for a couple of hours on a Sunday evening. So we had that, and there was also Friday CYC, obviously, which was at the meeting room. And then at one stage, we had a Canadian Christadelphian came over, a young lady, 5 years older than me. I think I was 14, she was 19. I had a massive crush on her,
Oh.
and. At one point, she suggested that we have a Wednesday evening gathering, do the readings, play a game, that sort of thing. And I remember she came to me, and her opening line was, "Do you want?" Because she was 19, she was living in a flat. I think she was working at the Christadelphian nursing home,
Okay.
which I later went on to work at, and
Oh.
she said. She said to me, "Do you want to come over Wednesday evening?" And I'm thinking, "What?" Not realizing that this was a group thing.
Yeah.
Right, okay, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So it turns out that was the group thing, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. One of the things that happened, one of the people there who was, from, shall we say, a quite traditional Christadelphian family, after we'd been
Mhm.
doing this for a while, this became a regular Wednesday evening thing. We'd go around to someone's house, we'd do the readings, talk about that a little bit, play a couple of games. It broke up the week nicely. We met for a couple of hours. And then um, of the one of the young sisters there said, "Why don't we get brother so and so to come along on these Wednesday evenings, and we could have like a revelation class?"
Mm.
And I'm thinking, "Oh gosh, no." Um, this works. This is fun. We're spending a little
Mhm.
bit of time looking at the Bible. We're enjoying each other's company. It's the middle of the week. We've been at
Yeah, pretty
school.
casual. Yeah.
Yeah, let's not go there. And in the end, we didn't. It was kind of argued
Woo!
against. But yeah, that was the sort of thing I found myself in later years thinking: why is like 90% plus of what we do sitting, listening to a brother talking to us about something?
Mhm.
Um, and but anyway, again, we'll get to that. But so yeah, so Shirley was pretty cool at that point, up to the age of about 16. Really good social life. Some guys that were 2-3 years older that again, I thought they were so cool, and they were giving me the time of day as a I don't know, a 14-year-old, and they're 16, 17. That's, yeah, none of my school friends had hung out with mates that were 16 and 17,
Mhm.
so I thought this was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Something I remember experiencing when I was younger too. Everyone always kind of looked up towards whoever was a little bit older than them. And that's funny because now you're bringing back memories that our ecclesia was right across the street from a McDonald's. So that, that was our fast food fix we could swing by after meeting. And then on the topic of socializing too, did you go to a lot of other like weekends and Bible schools? And are there any that you really
Yeah,
liked?
yeah. So we called them youth weekends here. Not so much Bible schools. I know that quite often we'd get visitors from Canada and America and stuff, and they'd talk about Bible schools. Manitoulin was one that always came up.
Mhm.
Not so much Bible schools, but youth weekends were a big thing.
Okay.
And that escalated a little bit more when I was kind of 16 plus, because I changed ecclesia. Um,
Again. Okay. So this is your third?
yeah, yeah. There's another one coming as well. So
Okay.
moved
I'll
around a bit.
stay tuned. All right.
um, but yeah, going off all over the country, and again at kind of 15, 16, telling your school friends, "Oh yes, I'm off to Manchester this weekend, meeting friends and stuff," sounds like pretty cool, because like, what are they doing this weekend? Well, not a lot,
Mhm.
sitting at home
Yeah,
doing the
just staying at
homework,
home. Yeah.
watching telly and stuff. when you get to kind of 17, 18, that's a lot less cool, because what the people from school and college are doing at that point is quite a bit more
Partying.
cool than what you're doing. But at 15, 16, that was good, and going around meeting people. The other thing that we had that was pretty big was campaign weeks. So we
Is that
would
like
have,
preaching?
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So at the start of the year, there'd be a list of campaigns that were happening that year
Hmm.
in different parts of the UK, where you'd go there for a week. You'd stay either at a brother and sister's house, or sometimes one really good one. We had the run of a little hotel,
Ooh.
a B&B we'd call it. I don't know if that
Okay.
you'd call it a B&B over there, bed and breakfast.
Usually, like a
But
bed and breakfast is like a house that was turned into like a place you can
yeah,
stay.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
bedrooms. Okay. Yep. All
yeah,
right.
that's right. So yeah, I booked on, my first one was Manchester campaign, and it was in 1991. I'm
Woo.
going to age myself. I was 16 years old, and
I'm not going to say how old I was.
and it was a real game changer, because I got to know people there that are still friends to this day, and like suddenly I've got friends from around the country. Like in a
Mhm.
youth weekend, you tended to stick with the people that you knew, because a weekend
Mm.
wasn't really a long time for getting to know new people properly. But over the course of a week, you sat with
Yeah.
people at the Bible exhibition, chatting to them. You went round knocking on doors with people, and you're chatting on the way. So Manchester campaign it changed everything, and I'm forever grateful that I went to it. Um,
Mm.
when I think about some of the things that we did, the whole thing about knocking on people's doors to talk to them about the Bible, and standing in town centres on top of an upturned bucket, shouting. Like you walk past those people now, and you think, yeah, I was doing that at 16 years old.
Yeah, you just hop up and start preaching in a public area?
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
And these
Wow.
these poor people are just trying to go about their daily shopping or whatever. They
Yeah.
got me shouting them about the
Y
Bible. So
Yeah, it makes me think of when I'd go through the mall and the rule is don't make eye contact because there's all the little vendors with their little, like, trolleys,
yes,
and they're trying to
yes,
sell you, and so they'll, like, make eye
yes,
contact and be like, "You need our new product, come here and I'll trial it on
yes,
you," and I'm like, "No, no, no, no,
definitely.
no. I'm just trying to go to the store."
And the thing is, I would always have talked negatively about that sort of experience, but because we were Christadelphians, because we were spreading the message, that meant that
Yeah.
you selling your mobile phone, or you promoting your charity over there, that's you shouldn't be doing that, but we're promoting God's message, so we've got God's permission to be standing here shouting this, and all of that. So
But you were okay with the, door to door too? Like, did you feel awkward, or did you have a good skill at that? Like, I feel like that would be mortifying to me just thinking about it, to be
I
quite
don't know.
honest.
I didn't mind it.
Okay.
Um, you know, I remember going with a older brother one time. I can't remember which campaign it was, but I remember him, and he was significantly old. I mean, I was teens, and he was like 60,
Mhm.
and
Oh, wow.
we knocked the door. The lady opened, and he said to her, "I was just admiring your tulips." And I thought, okay, fair enough. Um,
I mean,
and
I would be admiring them too. I love a nice tulip.
Well, there you go. So it was about kind of trying to find some sort of connection, so that even if
Mhm.
they weren't going to drop everything and come and follow Christ with you, you at least left a positive impression with them.
And
There was very little kind of nastiness. There was lots of
that's
no,
good.
thank you, and door slammed straight shut. But no one really was nasty or unpleasant.
I like to think that's how Jesus got his apostles. He's like, "Hey, I like those fish in your nets. You're a really good fisherman. You wanna come follow me? I've got God's word for you."
Yeah, maybe that's what I should have tried. Should have taken some fish and yeah, yeah,
Ah. Alright, and it sounds like you eventually joined as a brother sometime
yeah.
during
So
your
this
adolescence. Do you wanna talk about that a little bit?
this was when I was still at Shirley, and I was 15 years old. And there'd been quite a run of baptisms. There were a lot of young people at that
Okay,
place.
so it started coming up.
Yeah, the membership of the ecclesia was like about 130 or something, which was I don't know how that compares over
I
there, but
think
that was
that's a
quite a
pretty
big
good
one.
size. Yeah, I'd say
Yeah,
that's a big one,
and a lot of young people on it as well, on
especially,
top of
yeah.
that. And so it was interesting. I'd started having instruction, as we called it, going along to a brother's house every Monday evening.
Man, you
And
were busy on these weeknights too.
yeah, I
That's what,
know.
3 nights a week of
Never,
instructions and teaching
never
and
got any homework done or anything, but that's
yeah.
okay. Um, and so did that for a few months. A lot of people were getting baptized. Two of my peers, sort of my age, had been baptized a couple of months earlier. And
Mhm.
I remember one of our social evenings round at a friend's house, and I got chatting to their mum and dad, who were in the ecclesia, quite prominent people in the ecclesia, people that I'd always got on well with, had always been kind to me and welcoming and stuff. And we got talking. And I didn't really go to their house that evening thinking about baptism or thinking about having
Mhm.
a conversation about baptism. But as this conversation went on, and it would be wrong, I don't want to give the impression that they kind of pressured me or railroaded me. They didn't. It was just a conversation that kind of led me there. And by the end of that conversation, I must have been talking, I'd gone there to socialize with my friends, ended up talking to the mum and dad for, I don't know, an hour and a half.
Oh,
And
wow. Yeah.
came away from that thinking, yeah, I'm going to do it.
Hmm.
So I was baptized on the 6th of February, 1991.
Yeah,
And
February baptisms, me too.
okay, well, you see, it's interesting you say that. If you check the archive in the Christadelphian Magazine, and this was
Mm.
one of the first black marks that pissed me off a little bit. The date that was entered in the magazine was March which was
Huh.
wrong. So I thought, okay. But never mind, one of those things. I didn't resign on the spot because of that. But
They
there,
slighted you immediately. They're like, let's just humble him a little bit.
yeah. Well, there were a couple of things that happened. Well, a few things that happened pretty soon after baptism that just
Hmm.
started to sow the seed a little bit of not doubt but discontentment. Uh,
Interesting. Okay.
so, 'cause part of the appeal of getting baptized and being a member and being a Christadelphian was belonging, being
Mhm.
part of something.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, I assume it's the same over there. You would always get every year an address roll published, which had all the names and addresses and phone numbers of all the
Oh, yeah.
members of
Like
the
the address
ecclesia,
book.
along
Yeah.
with
Contact
the
info. Yeah.
contact info, and along with the plan of who's speaking when during the year and everything.
Yeah, basically everyone got to take the different roles on the
Yeah,
ecclesia. So
yeah,
who's exhorting, who's presiding,
yeah.
all of that kind of stuff.
That's
Yeah, I
right.
remember my dad usually did that spreadsheet for our ecclesia.
Okay, and so I was baptized in the February, so the address roll was already out for that year. So when it was
Mhm.
coming round the
For the
for the
following year,
new
I
one to be
guess.
published,
Okay.
and it came out, and I wasn't in it, and
Ooh.
again, I'm not a diva. It's fine, but I just thought to myself, right, these two that I mentioned of
Who
my
had been baptized before?
friends that
Mhm.
were in, shall we say, more conventional Christadelphian families, that would not have happened to
Oh.
them.
Oh,
And
because your mother or was it your
yeah,
dad had gone to the Baptist
yeah, and
meeting
I, and
or
I don't
church.
think it was. I don't think it was deliberate, but I
But he
think there was
wasn't
a
there to, like, advocate for you almost, to be like, "Oh,
yeah,
yeah, put my
there was
son
a
on."
there was a
Hmm.
subconscious thing. I think if they had published that and one of those two hadn't been in it, then they would have republished it. Um,
Yeah, potentially.
and that was
Hmm.
just a little, not a biggie, but just a little
Yeah, but
kind of
some families hold more
thing.
sway, that influence,
Yeah,
in the hierarchy that's kinda unspoken, where some people kind of have a stronger influence.
yeah.
Mm.
And then as a member, I got to go to my first members meeting, business meeting. Right,
Okay.
what an experience that was. Goodness me. And
I know.
this is where, so the whole thing about Christadelphians not being political and not
Hmm.
voting and so forth, which I always had big issues with. I have never been to anything more political than that business meeting. I mean, it was
Oh yeah.
nasty.
Oh
And
yeah. People speak up. Hmm.
yeah. And there was I won't say names, but there was a case at the time of a couple
Hmm.
who probably at the time in their 40s who were members. They were both divorced and they had married each other, right?
Okay.
And
Mm.
there was me at 15 years old thinking, I'm out of my depth here. A, this is none of my business. And
Yeah.
B, well, yeah,
They're
if that's a
adults.
sin, and at that point I didn't have a firm view on it, but if I do now, if that's a sin, then
Hmm.
that's their sin. That's
Yeah. Their
why
problem.
am I here as a 15-year-old kid who knows nothing about life, expected to cast my vote on whether we can have
Were
them
they
in
gonna like
or not?
disfellowship them potentially if people
Yeah.
voted that way?
Um,
Okay.
and in the end,
Ooh.
the ABs came up with a compromise thing because it was
Mm.
the ecclesia was split down the middle,
Split. Hmm.
and they came up with a compromise which was rubbish, really. I mean, I can see why they did it. They were trying to
Did
kind
they
of hold it
strip
all
him of
together.
his role?
No, they said they're not allowed to break bread with us, but we encourage them to come along and prove their dedication by attending regularly for a period of, I think it was about
Oh.
six
Oh
months.
no. Mm-mm-mm.
And even
That's
as a 15-year-old, I'm thinking,
mm-mm-mm.
right, which passage of scripture have you got this solution from? And
Yeah.
the, their commitment is not in question because they are asking to be part of this. They're asking to be
Yeah.
members. And in the end, that kind of fell apart.
Did they not follow through and like choose to accept that compromise?
I think it
Do
was
you
voted
remember?
down, as I recall.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and in the end, by a margin, bear in mind, I said this ecclesia's got 130 people, but for the
Mhm.
number that were at the
Yeah, who
business
like
meeting,
could
I
vote,
remember
yeah.
these numbers. In
Oh,
the end, it was voted to welcome them back by a margin of 18 to 14. I think it was one of those where
wow.
we just got lucky on who
What
wasn't there
day?
that
Who
day
didn't
and
come? Yeah, like
and
someone
so
was
on.
sick with their family and then like we're like,
Yeah.
"All right, let's vote."
And then there was all sorts of nastiness and fallout after that. So,
Wow.
at the
All
end of the
because
day,
two
I
people
was,
fell in love, two consenting adults who weren't currently married to anyone else, and they were both wanted to attend the same meeting.
yeah. Um,
Wow.
so at the time, right, yeah, 15 years old, I was still having a great time with my friends. It
Yeah.
wasn't kind of oh, I'm not sure I can be
Yeah,
part of this
felt
kind
a
of
revel.
moment, but it was just
Yeah.
kind of the first kind of thing. And then
You were seeing it now, though. Once you were in it, you were seeing some of the culture stuff you probably hadn't realized before getting baptized and all that.
yeah, that's exactly right. And then at the end of my time as a Christadelphian, sort of one of the final straws, which we'll get to, but
Mhm.
it kind of there's a symmetry to it, which we'll come to with another
Can't
case
wait.
that was that was kind of happening a few years later.
Okay. Did you want to talk at all more about what you liked about being Christadelphian as we keep talking about your childhood, teenage years, all of that?
I remember we ordered a lot of pizza, and I also remember that there was a family that went on holiday to, I think, Canada, and
People love Canada. Oh my
I know,
gosh.
yeah, I know.
That-
Um, and they came back having discovered The Simpsons. Um, and like none of us had seen The Simpsons.
I mean, that thing's been on TV for like 30 years, so.
I know, it was on satellite TV here, and it was
Okay,
there were
yeah,
very few
yeah.
people at that stage that had satellite TV.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but they introduced us to it, and I became the supplier of Simpsons videos because I had a friend at
Ah,
school with satellite TV.
yeah. Yeah. He was bootlegging it for the church group. I love it.
On a Sunday night, was sit round and watch an episode of The Simpsons.
I
It was.
Can I tell you, I wasn't allowed to watch it. My parents would turn it off and be like, "No, that's not appropriate for you."
Well, that was
Aw.
So my parents were pretty cool in terms of, well, actually very cool in terms of what I could watch. If I tell you at,
Mm.
I don't know, well, before we'd left Watford, so I must have been, we moved at 11, so I
Yeah.
was watching Dallas and the A Team, and there was a program based in a school called Grange Hill, which was quite hard hitting, involved
Hmm.
covering stories about drug abuse and abusive relationships
Yeah,
and,
that's
and things
heavy.
like that. And it was on. It was a children's program,
That doesn't sound like anything
but
I had on
I
TV.
know.
I was watching like
Um,
Barney the dinosaur.
yeah,
Like
Barney the
that was
dinosaur,
harder to
followed
deal
by
with.
Grange Hill, and a lot of parents wouldn't let their child watch that. In fact, it was on at 5:10, just before Neighbours came on. Right, so a lot of people were allowed to watch Neighbours, but not allowed to watch Grange Hill before it. Um, I'll tell you, like the reason I've never ever touched any drugs, not even cannabis or anything.
Hmm. Wow. Well, I guess that was a positive effect. Our parents think it's going to be the opposite, but you're like, nope, nope. I learned my lesson young.
Yep, definitely. But there were quite a few that weren't allowed to watch that or weren't allowed to watch various things. So, but yeah, The Simpsons, we were all sitting around and watching. So there we go. We ordered a lot of pizza as well on our social things. I remember that.
Makes
So,
sense.
hmm.
Classic. Um,
One of the other things when I was going to Shirley was every year in the summer we had a camp. So we went to a place in North Wales in the middle of nowhere,
mhm.
and there was a camp, and all the young people from Shirley went there with various others from other places. One year there was a bit of an invasion from some young people from Cardiff and Swansea in South Wales. They came along, so we got to
Mhm.
know them as well, and that was pretty cool. That was a
Hmm.
really good time. A lot of socialising, a lot of uh, going for walks, which isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I quite like that. And
Yeah, I'd be down for that.
swimming
Sounds peaceful, lovely,
swimming in the sea and all of that, and some Bible study as well. But it was
Yeah.
unlike
You
some of
throw
the
that in there.
events. Yeah, kind of everything.
Yeah.
Unlike some of the events, it was a good balance of fun
Not just sitting
and
around reading the
Bible.
Bible the whole time. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a little
yeah,
more scenic and fun.
yeah.
Well,
And
that's good.
I remember whoever had been the duty team that day, like doing the cooking and washing up and all of that. There were typically like 8 people on a team. The last thing in the day before we all went to bed was we would sit round and those people would each choose one of the hymns for us to sing.
You just sing 8 hymns?
Yeah. Um,
Oh, all
so
right. Praise the Lord.
well, indeed, except it was the Christadelphian hymn book, so it's
Ooh,
kind of
Son
eight.
of God, our Savior.
You got it. No musical instruments, so I'm not sure the
All
sound
cappella
quality was
too.
terribly good. But and then what would happen after that? Kind of on the way from the main tent to our tents to go to bed, some of the couples would disappear up the hill.
Mm.
Um, Unfortunately, I wasn't in a couple at that time, so I would just watch
Mm.
them go off, and
Yeah.
um, that was
Be
that.
sad.
But yeah, I feel like it was just an open secret that was happening. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I was perhaps just a little bit before that stage where that was important to me. So
Okay.
yeah, but camp was really good. That was a lot of fun.
All right. So that was it sounds like all typical Christadelphian stuff. Did you feel like you weren't like normal compared to people at school and stuff, though? Anything that you were missing out on?
At that stage, not so much, because like I said, the people at school weren't really doing anything amazing with their weekends anyway. As
Hmm.
I got a little bit older and so I finished school at 16 and went to sixth form college for 2 years. And that's when, people started going out, out and
What's the
discovering
drinking
alcohol.
age
And
there?
drinking age is 18, but that doesn't stop people
So it's a
necessarily.
little bit before that, realistically.
Yeah, I mean it's 18 when you're out.
Yeah, like legally buying
At
one
home, you can
yourself.
legally drink with your parents' permission from 5 years old, which is a bit bizarre. But
Whoa, well,
um,
that's different than
yeah,
ours.
I
You
mean,
get arrested if they're under 21. They drink at home, even.
yeah, I think you might have that right over there rather than 5 years old, but there we go. Um,
5's a little
and
young.
so people were doing that, and I mean, I think Mum and Dad had got me to try a little bit of beer and wine. I didn't particularly like them. Cider was all
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I've made up for it since, but yeah, that just wasn't a thing at that stage. So from kind of 16 on, and I remember as well, when I was about 17 or 18, I got invited to. This was not a Christadelphian thing. I got invited by someone at college to a Rocky Horror party, and I remember like not really knowing what it was, knowing that I wouldn't be able to go. I mean, actually, Mum and Dad probably wouldn't have stopped me, but I'd be busy that weekend with Christadelphian things.
They keep you busy. They do.
Yeah. And no internet to look up what Rocky Horror is. But does that mean anything to
Back
you?
in the day, yeah, yep. I
Yeah.
at least remember those times. I
Yeah,
was around
okay,
for
so,
pre-internet. Yep.
Yeah, so finding out later what Rocky Horror Party probably looked like
It was probably a fun time. I'll say that.
yeah, absolutely. Not the sort of fun I was used to. So
You can probably still make up for it because I'm pretty sure those still pop up with whether it's viewing or just whatever else. But
yeah. So and at that time as well, because I'd become disillusioned a little bit with the Shirley ecclesia, the incidents at the business meeting and just
some of
the
the drama.
traditionalness of it. I was always a little bit rebellious and, like I said, kind of on the left wing of things. And
yeah, I mean, it's more conservative worldviews. Yeah.
yeah, one of the things actually that got to me very early, in fact, the night I was baptized, was my best mate at the ecclesia at the time had not yet been baptized. He has since, but he hadn't been baptized.
Okay.
He wasn't allowed to be the guy that holds a towel for me.
Oh, wait, to hold the towel? I thought you were gonna say like hold your feet or something, like be at
Nope.
the tub.
So we would have someone who would just hold the towel so that when you come out ready,
Yeah,
and
that doesn't seem like a hard role to do.
I chose him for that, but because he wasn't a baptized brother, he wasn't allowed to do that. And I thought,
that's so mean.
It's holding a towel. Come on.
It's holding a towel.
Right.
I'm 100% with you on that. I don't get it.
So
is it in the Bible that the person who's holding the towel has to be baptized? Excuse me? Excuse me. Can you just show me that?
Yeah.
Show me where it is.
Yeah. So, I didn't want to start off my first day as a Christadelphian by having a fight, so I chose someone else. But
can you imagine if you did and be like, no, I'm not getting that tub until he's over here. Excuse me, just full diva moment.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
They'd be like, well, do you want a new member or not?
So after my baptism, I was only there for about another year, and I moved to another ecclesia called Knowle and Dorridge, which was just a few miles away. I'd started getting to know some of the people there. There was a guy there who I'd previously known at the Watford ecclesia that had moved up there, and it was a more relaxed setting. For example, at their Bible class, they sat in a circle rather than in rows. Which,
instead of having the one person at the podium and everyone else is like looking at them. Yeah.
Yep.
That seems kind of nice. Yeah, kind of like Camelot and the Round Table, all that stuff.
Yeah, so I had a better feel for that, and I changed ecclesia. My mum stayed at Shirley, my little sister was still at Shirley, but I moved to Knowle and Dorridge, and that was where I really kind of, not that people hadn't been kind at Shirley, but I really felt the kindness because I was reliant on people at that stage for lifts, which was out of people's way.
Yeah, you were on your own.
I was never stuck. They were always very welcoming, and that was a good time. Slightly different group of people, but same sort of vibe, really. It was, it was back to people's houses and all of that. And at that point, I was starting to contribute a little bit as well.
Yeah, taking on your role of being a brother now.
Yeah. Now that was.
You don't look excited by that.
That was tricky because I didn't like speaking. The standing up and speaking bit, I'm
in front
of
everyone.
I'm a teacher. The standing up and speaking bit is fine. It was the prep. I was never a scholar, and so I would find myself coming up to a speaking appointment, and I only ever did my own ecclesia. I didn't go to to others.
Yeah, like the traveling.
Nobody
and,
wanted me, and
yeah.
that suited me. But
Aw.
it was kind of, I don't know. I gave it a go. I just
Yeah, but
didn't
it
like
wasn't
the
for
prep,
you.
and I was
Yeah.
always thinking to myself, if someone just gave me a script, I can go up there and deliver it. But I was
Mhm.
sitting staring at blank pieces of paper, and I was thinking, there are people there I'm going to be talking to that have been studying this book for 50 years. What can I
Yeah.
go along? Because I wasn't a good student of the Bible. I didn't have deep insights. I didn't have new ways of thinking, oh, now if you look at this story this way, maybe this
Yeah.
kind of thing. I didn't
Mhm.
have any of that skill.
But you were
So
a man, so you were expected to.
yeah, and also I'd got to the stage where I was starting to look at people who were speaking and think, "You're not good at this. Someone should tell you." Um, there were there were plenty that were good.
I mean, yeah, I've definitely seen that. There's a few where if they were going, I might look at the schedule and be like, maybe I'll skip till next week, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Like there was just slightly lower attendance those days, but no one could tell them. Like you don't want to tell them, but like, it's not going to be a good time.
that's right. And at that time as well, being a little bit older, I could, although I didn't drive at that point, I could find my way around the country to more and more events and all of that. And so there was always a very big youth weekend happened twice a year called Swanwick, named after
Okay.
the little village that it was in. And
We're
that
very
was very,
creative with our names, yeah.
yeah.
Like,
That
what
was,
sleep are you? Whatever town it's in, that's
yep,
it.
that's what it's called. So that Swanwick was interesting because loads of people went, and it's like, you're going to Swanwick? Yeah, of course I'm going to Swanwick. You're going, yeah, of course I'm
Yeah,
going to
that's a
Swanwick. Everyone's
social
going to
event you
Swanwick.
got to go to, yeah.
It was really expensive.
Ooh.
The food was terrible, and it was nearly all wall to wall sitting and listening to
Yeah, none of the
speakers.
fun stuff.
And so you'd get little bits where you could go off and chat and whatever, but
Mm.
very
Mm.
little else kind of thing. And
Well, I mean, that was a
and
lot of
everyone went,
teenagers together, so they basically locked you guys down, knowing you'd be trouble if you weren't managed, I guess. Like,
yeah,
let's not have them all running into the woods.
yeah, that's right. And I remember at one of those Swanics, I remember on the Sunday morning, there was kind of even before the memorial service on the Sunday at Swanwick, there was another kind of session. And I remember
How early
the
are people
guy
getting up?
yeah, I know, get up, have a terrible breakfast and go and sit and listen again.
Oof.
But I kept going back. I went 5 times to this thing. It's bizarre.
I think it's because everyone else is going. You're just like, all right, I'll go with you, I guess.
Yeah,
See
and the big,
people.
that's exactly it. And the big tradition
Socializing.
of Swanwick at the end,
Yeah.
you got the photo, and you got everyone to sign your Swanwick photo.
Oh,
and all that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I've still
That
got those
commemorative photo.
in the loft, and of course we're all trying to write something that we think is terribly funny, and you look back, and
Yeah,
think,
clever.
what? I'm sure that meant something at the time, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember one of those Sunday mornings, the guy who was kind of in charge of organising Swanwick, he said, brothers, please make sure you are wearing ties and suit jackets for the memorial service. And at that point, I don't know, what was I, 16, 17, I had a tie. I didn't own a suit jacket.
Yeah, it's a
and
little bit classist, honestly, just throwing that out there too. People didn't
Absolutely.
have the funds, yeah.
And like this, my rebellious side was already starting to kick in then. Why do we always go wearing suits and ties? I know I've heard you talking to some of the other people on the previous podcasts, and they've all been fantastic, and they've mostly been female, and so there's been a
We
lot of
have had a lot.
conversation about the
You guys are hard to schedule. I'm putting this on you guys. I've opened the invite 50-50, and you guys are like, I'll get to it.
Sorry about that. I'm here now. So you've talked a lot about the expectations about wearing hats and skirts and dresses rather than trousers and so on. Honestly,
well, we have heard about the blue suits from Rob. I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there was no specifying which colour the suits had to be.
Okay.
But there was an
Purple.
expectation of wearing suits, and I didn't own a suit until I don't know when, but. Eventually,
most teenagers
and
don't really need them.
No,
I'll be honest.
no.
Like, no one's like, "Oh, it's a new suit for Christmas! Yay!"
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of rebelled about that. Sometimes I even went without a tie just to kind of make my point. I don't know who I was making it to or why or whatever. I mean, the sad thing is now, like every day for work, I'm wearing a suit and tie, and I quite like wearing it, but
But
it's my choice.
yeah.
So that was a thing as well, and just things just chipping away at just that little message that do you really belong here was coming
The
from
conformity, I
quite
think,
an
yeah.
early stage, but the social life was off the charts. I was getting like 3 or 4 letters a day from people around the country that I'd
Aw,
met on
yeah.
campaigns and youth weekends and
Nice.
stuff. Massive telephone bill, because again,
Yeah, back in the day,
there's
and you had a
no kind
recorded
of
phone.
yeah, that's right. Having to kick mum and dad out of their bedroom so I could have a private conversation
Yeah.
with my girlfriend and stuff like that. But yeah, a really, really good time. And my best mate now, I will say his name because I've got his permission, Mark. I have him because of that, and he is just the best. And
Aw. Hey, Mark.
there's no regrets at all about kind of that phase of my life
That's
and
great.
the things I was potentially missing out on at the time. It wasn't a
Yeah.
factor.
That seems like the less common story of people still having a close relationship with someone that was a Christadelphian at the same time as them. But that's really great. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Having
he's
someone
not
in
now
your-
either, so that probably
I
helps.
wonder if that's part of it. I was waiting to see. I was like, let me just open that up a little bit more. Okay. Knew it.
Yeah. So I remember as well with the youth weekends and the talks and everything, whenever a brother was standing at the front talking to a group of young people, it was like an obsession. They seemed to feel the need to talk about sex all the time. And it was
I was going to say
just...
either baptism or sex. Those are the two that they love to preach to young people.
Oh,
They're
my
coming up every
goodness.
time. Yep.
And do you know, it was embarrassing.
Uncomfortable.
You could tell that they were uncomfortable. But
Yeah, that doesn't help.
It's also, when you think now about what good sex education is like, this was like the opposite. It was just,
I'm sure.
Don't do it.
Yeah. Don't do it, and then don't get divorced if things don't work out. So you're stuck with it, high risk.
Yeah, not off. And I remember at one point, I'm just going to say, for the benefit of anyone who does find themselves listening to this, it's not the person that you'll remember me being with for a long time. Just for her sake, I want to say that.
That is nice. Disclaimer.
Yeah, but I did find myself in a sexual relationship with someone from the meeting, and it was
honestly, I don't know anyone, and this was how many years ago?
Yeah. But the shame that you felt, and
because of the messaging,
that feeling that I'm the only person doing this. I am a terrible person. Years later, you find out everyone was doing it.
Yep.
And including some of the, grown-ups, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. I remember my parents saying which of my aunts and uncles had and hadn't before marriage. And I was like,
Yeah. But I remember I had, and again, I've got permission to share this. I had a conversation with Mark one night, and we were staying at another friend's house, but there was just us two in the room.
Okay.
And I was like, I want to tell him. If I can't tell him, I absolutely can't tell anyone. I'm going to tell him. I'm sure he'll understand. And as fate would have it, he had exactly the same thing to tell me.
Look at you guys, bros bonding.
Oh, definitely. I mean, different girl, thankfully, but yeah.
That is good.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, that would have been awkward.
Would have been awkward. Yeah.
I can't remember who actually said it first, but I just remember it was such a relief to be able to talk about that, because it was actually building into something really kind of unhealthy in my mind.
All that shame, and every week you're supposed to reflect on your sins when you take the bread and wine, and so you're just like, oh, whoops.
Yeah, and there was always the feeling that of all the sins you could commit, this was the one.
Well, that's the one they always talk about.
Yeah, this was the one that was worse than anything else. So that was that was quite a big moment having that conversation together. And then
Hmm.
round about that time, I went to university as well.
Oh.
So before that, actually, I had a couple of years where I was, well, first of all, I worked in a cinema, movie theatre, you would say, probably.
Yep.
And then I worked at the Christadelphian nursing home.
Yeah, we
And
don't have any that I'm aware of over here, but I have heard that they exist, like in a general
yeah,
sense.
it was interesting. I met my first wife at the Christadelphian nursing home, but she was
Please tell me she wasn't old. She wasn't a resident.
no, she wasn't a resident. There was one of the residents that I was absolutely in love with, but not in that way. So
Yeah, but just
we're
like
all
a
right.
sweet little friend.
We're not going to get that weird.
Thank you. But sometimes we do get weird, but hopefully not that weird today.
So yeah, and the cinema was an absolutely toxic environment. I was 18 when I started working there. Just sexism, and when I look back and think how people were treated there, it was not good. And I went to the nursing home, which was me, another guy, and a whole team of women. And
makes sense, yeah.
if I said to you there was just as much sexism there, it was in a very different way. Because at that stage, most of the people working there weren't Christadelphians. And so I think the idea that some people had of what that place was a little bit different from the reality. The care was really good. It was second to none.
Well, that's good. I'd probably rather have professionals giving care than being like, oh, you've read the Bible. You're in charge of like 30 older people now. Thanks.
Yeah, that's right. So that was an eye-opener, because what you got there was a lot of people who, being in the Christadelphian bubble, nearly everyone in Christadelphia over here at that time, I don't know if it's still the same, would be educated to a pretty high standard. Most people went to university. It was very middle class, white collar. It was, people did well professionally and in their studies.
I've seen that here generally,
Yeah, one of my good friends at Nolan Dorridge went to Oxford University and did very well there. And so going to the nursing home, I was working with a lot of people who hadn't been educated to that level. Some had, but and obviously the nurses in charge they'd got their nursing qualifications and so on, but a lot of the people like me that were, care assistants essentially hadn't, and they were living on minimum wage in quite difficult circumstances, sometimes having to work very long hours to make ends meet. But again, had a really, really good time, but it was a real eye-opener. There were a couple of other Christadelphian girls of my age that I knew beforehand that worked there at the same time as me, one of whom I'm still really good friends with now. But I think they would both say, yeah, we learned a bit about life working there with that. And then I went to university, and my goodness, what an eye-opener that was, because that was when, you've asked me if I felt I was missing out on anything. That was when I found out what I'd been missing out on, and just the kind of the normality of it. So I remember that first night at university, and everyone's drinking, and by then I could drink a little bit more, but I hadn't really done nights out drinking. And of course you're there and you want to fit in and all of this. So I got pretty drunk on my first night, not intentionally, just trying to kind of, not be the one kind of left out and all of that. And also people having one night stands and things. And, so one of my mates on my course was getting very pally with one of the girls on the course. And one evening we were out and they went off home together. And I said to him the next day, like, what time did you get back? And he said, oh, no, I didn't. I slept with her.
Spent the night,
just matter of fact, like that was normal.
No shame. Not like, oh, I had to tear myself up on Sunday over that.
Yeah. And it became apparent that actually, not for everyone, but actually that is normal. That's how some people live. And like, oh, okay. I mean, I've kind of seen it on the telly, but, so real eye-opener. And I think actually university might be where Christadelphians lose quite a lot of people, because people are kept in such kind of bubbles, aren't they?
Yeah, all of your
Um,
socializing is really within that bubble, so it's
it
hard to
is.
see other
And
lifestyles.
and like I said, my parents were pretty good. They didn't particularly try to shelter me. Like I said,
Mhm.
I was allowed to watch Grange Hill,
Yeah,
but
that's a big one. Yep.
but some really sheltered them, and then they go off to
Mhm.
university, and there's this
Yeah.
whole other world. And some of them, some of the people I knew, they still conform, they still live the Christadelphian life, but some, that
But
was
some
the
of
point
yeah.
at which, yeah, there's more to life.
But they make that choice of whether they want to keep their world small or
Yeah.
explore what they're seeing.
Yeah. So by this stage, and I was 20 when I went to university, and by this stage, I'm still enjoying aspects of being a Christadelphian. I've still got my group of friends.
Mhm.
You sort of get to that stage in life where life takes over, and it's not youth weekends anymore, and it's not
Mhm. You're an
writing
adult
letters
now.
and all of that. I remember us going to a youth weekend, and it was the last one that we went to, me and my group, in a town called Wigan, and which is
That's
sort of Manchester area, and
okay.
and it we were there, and we just looked around,
Feeling
and
old.
we're just like, yeah, this isn't for us anymore, And it
Yeah.
was it was perfectly nice and all of that. I remember there was a girl that was flirting with Mark, and which was quite normal, and and I was saying to him, "Oh, hello," and he says, "Yeah, mate, she's 15."
Yeah,
Oh,
too young.
okay, right, yeah, no, the youth weekends aren't for us anymore.
Yeah.
And
At least he drew that line.
well, yeah. Um, so then it kind of changes a bit, doesn't it? And like I say, life takes over. University life. Other people were at work and stuff. Some of the people that
Mhm.
I'd been friends with who were a little bit older than me were starting, getting married, starting families, and things
Mhm.
like that. And the social aspect becomes a little bit less. And you've
Yeah.
replaced it with a different social aspect at your university, and you find actually these people really are cool. These are good people, and
Yeah,
people I really enjoy spending time with.
and that
Um,
not all outsiders are bad.
yeah, yeah. But
Evil
I was
people.
I was still on board at that point.
Okay.
I was increasingly rebellious. People didn't like asking me to do the reading on a Sunday morning because I would use the NIV instead of the authorized version, and they didn't
Oh,
like me. They didn't like me giving the prayers because I would call God you instead of thee or thou.
hey,
And
you
some
up
didn't
there.
like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, not quite like that. I was still very respectful, but I didn't get the point of
Isn't it
the.
funny? The tradition, though. You have to enforce the tradition or you don't fit in.
But that's the thing. That's what it is. It's a tradition. There is nothing. I remember being at another talk that someone was giving, but it was a really good one, and someone talking about different versions of the Bible and saying, if you prefer a different version, that's fine. There's nothing sacred about Elizabethan language, and
Yeah.
of course, lots of kind of tutting
Mm.
around and all of this. But I'm thinking, yes, that's exactly right. Show
That
me in the
progressive
Bible where it
stuff.
says I have to read the King James Bible.
Yep.
Um, so so yeah, I was still in, but rebelling, and at that age I was at voting age, so I voted, and I made sure everyone knew that I
Ooh, and like
voted.
regular political voting?
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh,
And
very
invited anyone
rebellious.
to argue with me. Main
Wow.
argument being, if you had the opportunity to vote to stop Hitler, wouldn't you do it? Is that not the
Oh, bad
Christian
timing
thing to
talking
do?
about that.
Um,
Oof.
so so yeah, yeah, we
You
won't
would
link
hope
that.
everyone would vote that way. You would hope.
You would. We won't link that to any
Yeah.
recent events,
Nope.
but
That is completely irrelevant to everything in the world right now.
yeah.
We're moving on. I
Moving
want
on.
to stay on the air.
Yep. So yeah, I was kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. The other thing that I look back on, and I look back with quite a bit of shame, is attitude towards homosexuality, because I can accept that the Bible says that homosexuality is a sin. Okay, right? And if you
Okay.
believe in the Bible, lock, stock, and barrel, by the way, why aren't you keeping the Sabbath? I never really got oh yeah, we do that bit of the Bible and not that bit, but
Yeah, a
whatever.
lot of cherry
If
picking.
yeah, okay, if you believe homosexuality is a sin, okay, I can accept that because the Bible pretty much says it. If you're going by the Bible, you should probably be stoning those people, but we won't encourage that.
Mhm.
But the attitude was not a helpful one for a young man developing his attitudes in life. And it wasn't just in Christadelphia, society's attitudes at the time, certainly over here.
Yeah, especially time-wise, the same over here is definitely a different culture towards that in general,
Yeah,
not just the Christadelphians, but many other religions as well. And
yeah.
non-religions even too, some people.
Um, and, if there was a suspicion or a rumor that someone was gay, that was to be ridiculed or pray for their healing, that sort of thing.
Mm.
So, through my parents, I'm led to believe that that has moved on somewhat now. There's probably still some way to go, but within the community, there's been some movement on that. Because actually, there aren't many people that haven't encountered, either within their family or their close circle,
Mhm.
someone who is gay.
It's almost as if it just naturally comes up all the time. It's
Yeah,
almost as if people are just born that way, huh?
yeah,
Like left-handed
yeah.
people.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And pray for their healing as well.
Yeah, let's pray for them.
So even though I can point to Christadelphian attitudes and I can point to things on the television that I was watching, I take responsibility myself for
Mhm.
my attitudes at the time, and
Mhm.
that's on me. But it didn't help. Fast forward, which we may get to in more detail, but fast forward, my daughter is gay, and I'm immensely proud of her, and I'm immensely proud of the fact that she was happy to tell me that, and
Mhm.
was
That's
able to,
wonderful.
to have that conversation. And I
Yeah.
just think, because I'd done a lot of work before knowing that, I'd
Mhm.
and I hadn't suspected it. It's like,
Hmm.
sometimes someone comes out and you think, yeah, I always knew, but I
Yeah.
didn't with
Huh.
my daughter. But I'd done a lot of work on myself anyway in the
Mhm.
years before that, and so the fact that she hopefully didn't see that attitude in me at any point,
Mhm.
hopefully has helped her. Um, but I remember going back to working at the cinema. There was a gay guy there, and I worked with a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses at the cinema. Um,
Okay, this is an
they weren't
interesting
they
group.
weren't gay to the best of my knowledge, but
Never know.
one of the managers was gay, and we absolutely ridiculed him. Um,
Aw.
and not to his face. I mean, whether that makes
Of
it better
course,
or
yeah,
worse, I don't
behind
know.
their back,
Um,
yeah, ugh.
but I suspect he knew, and it wasn't just us three.
Yeah, I'm
I
suspecting it
suspect
wasn't just you
because
guys,
that's what
yeah.
gay
Yep,
people were having to put up with at the
yep,
time. And I would love to meet him now and just say, I'm sorry. I
yeah,
wouldn't have a clue how to get in touch with him, and hopefully
mhm,
he's long since moved on from that. But
yeah,
yeah, being a Christadelphian didn't help with that. Let's
mhm.
say so.
But I'm glad to hear about the growth that you chose to go through and that your attitudes have changed since you've been free to think about that and reflect on it
Yeah,
on your own
yeah,
without that pressure.
yeah. So yeah, at university, the other thing that happened was I changed ecclesia again. The last one, I
Oh,
promise.
wait, fourth one.
Yeah.
Alright, keep counting.
So there was a thing over here about, and from listening to your other podcasts, I think that's probably similar. Different ecclesias had very different characteristics, and so there
Mhm,
were some that were very, very traditional,
mhm.
and some much more progressive and forward thinking, and with drum kits and guitars and things like that.
Well,
Um,
I've never seen that still, that's a myth.
well, um,
Ooh.
yeah, well, there's
Were you on
there.
the drums, though?
No, sadly, I was not able to play an instrument. This kind of
Mm,
undermines my argument a little bit because I kept on pushing for us to change, how we did the music, not just rely on the Christadelphian hymn book and not just the piano or the organ.
mhm.
The Psalms say it. They say, "Let everything that has breath praise the Lord." They list the instruments that you should be using.
Yeah,
All right.
David was dancing in the street, it was a party.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so when I was saying, come on, we need to do this, I didn't have anything to offer to the table because I wasn't musical. But
Me
so
neither. It's okay.
there were two ecclesias in Manchester, not where I lived, but I knew quite a lot of people from
That's
the
a
two
lot of
ecclesias.
ecclesias for one place. Wow.
Yeah, and Manchester's a big city.
Must
There
be
were a few
big,
around there,
yeah.
but there were two in particular that were kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, and there were the one. There was talk at one point that the one ecclesia was going to en masse disfellowship the other ecclesia because
Oh,
of
yeah, they'd
the way
love
they
to
did
do
things.
that.
Now,
Yep.
I don't know how much truth there was in that or how close it ever came to happening. But when I went to university, I was in a town called Crewe, which is about 30 miles south of Manchester, about 70 miles north of here. And there was an ecclesia there called Nantwich, named again after the village it was in, creative. And that was a very progressive meeting as well. And I already knew some people from there. One of my regrets as well is I joined that Nantwich meeting. I don't regret that, but
Naturally, yeah.
I regret that they kind of got me on the way out. Because
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
if they'd had 17-year-old me,
Yeah, you would have been loving
because
it.
honestly, I can't speak highly enough of that place. Just as a group of people, an ecclesia of about 40 to 50 people, a range of ages, and just the loveliest people.
It's
Didn't
nice.
take themselves too seriously, respected
Wow.
different points of view.
That's
And
nice. Yeah, genuinely.
although there was some musical talent there, but we couldn't like stick a whole band together. But they were willing to, try
To
things
try.
and all of this. They were very happy with me and my NIV, and
You finally
it
found a
was,
place where, yeah, they weren't like criticizing you. You could probably say your yous instead of the thee,
yeah,
thou.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Hmm.
And it was a lovely place. There were a couple of mechanics there, and by that stage, I had a car that kept breaking down, and they really
Ah.
helped me with that as well. And didn't never
Hmm.
charged anything, just helped me get it
Oh,
sorted.
very nice. Yeah.
Really lovely.
Just good people. Yeah.
Endless offers of dinners because they knew that I was living on
Diet.
student food,
Yeah.
let's say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have pot noodles in America?
I assume you mean like the block of noodles that you heat up and put some seasoning
Yeah.
on? Yep. Yep.
Seasoning might be pushing it, but there's
Usually there's at least a little packet of like
yeah, that's right.
radioactive flavored,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
colored stuff.
So a lot of those as a student,
Yeah.
very cheap and not a lot of skill required. So there were proper meals on offer regularly from the people of Nantwich. Just as an aside as well, like one of the things that happens with ecclesias that they are very kind of dependent on who comes and goes, and I've heard that Nantwich isn't the same as it was. A
That makes sense.
couple of key families left, a couple of
hmm
others came in, and it's sad
They do
because you'd like to think
evolve.
that if you stepped back into that tomorrow, it would be just the way you left it, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's the case. But that was the thing as well. Some people had an awful lot of power to kind of get things done. And I
hmm
remember saying this was back when I was at Nolan Dorridge and pushing for us to, there's this new hymn book came out called Praise the Lord, and it was much more modern, and it was
Was that
done
like
by
the
a
purple
group.
and greenish cover one?
No,
If I
it was a
remember.
ring bound cover with like laminated plastic. I want to say it was like
Oh, that's different than what I'm
yellow,
picturing.
red,
Yeah.
and blue and white stripes on it and stuff.
Okay.
But the cover was as vibrant as the songs. It was
Yeah.
my scene. It was upbeat, and I was pushing for us to start using this. And I
hmm
remember one of the ABs who I really liked, really nice guy. But he said to me, "The thing
Oh, it
is,
is
if we
the one
do."
I'm thinking of. I pulled up a picture on my phone.
Ah, yeah, that's right. They changed the cover to that. Yeah, there was a
Okay, yeah, I'm
previous
thinking of the
version
newer
to that.
cover, but it's like
Yes.
blue and green, praise the Lord.
Yeah, that made it over
It's
there
still there.
then.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that being like the cool one for like youth weekends.
Yeah, well, I believe I'm right in saying that was put together by what is called the Hoddesdon Committee, which included some of the people from the Nantwich Ecclesia that I was a member of. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't know anything about the origins. That's interesting.
yeah, and so I was pushing for this to be used, and
hmm
this brother said to me, the thing is, if we do that, then brother so and so and sister so and so probably won't stay. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
I'm thinking,
That's what
I
their
could,
faith
I
hinges
could
on?
say that. I'm not going to,
Yeah.
but I could say that. Why do I have to be the grown up in the room that just nods and
Yeah, who
accepts that? I could say, if you
sacrifices.
don't
Yeah.
have this, then I'm going.
Just like at
And
your baptism. Put your foot down. You could have
I'm
done it.
jumping
You were
about a
too
little bit.
nice.
Yeah, I was. Jumping about a little bit.
Okay.
Another thing that got to me when I was at Nolan Dorridge and talking about like being the speaker, and I said at Bible class we sat round in a circle, and one of the things that confused me, but I went with it at Nolan Dorridge. Like I said, it was more relaxed than the ecclesia I'd been at before, but it was still not, it was still Christadelphian,
Mhm.
when we had Bible class, it was always a brother that was leading it, but in
Naturally.
the discussion at the end, sisters would contribute.
Yes.
Which was fine with me. I
Mhm.
was all for that.
I'm
And
nervous about where this is going.
there was never a murmur about that. It was fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Fast forward to I've been asked to lead a Bible class, and it's one in a series that we're doing where people talk about their favorite thing. So we had one about people's favorite hymns. So people would introduce their favorite hymn, talk about why it's favorite, and we'd sing it. And, there'd be like
Okay.
5 or 6 people would do that. We had one that was about favorite passage of scripture. And
Naturally,
we'd look at
yeah.
it, talk about why. My one was probably, I think it was favorite Bible character.
Okay, another
And
classic.
as my preparation for it, I had to come up with one of my own and talk about it. And I had to arrange for a few other people to do so. Now, I asked a number of people, including a sister,
women.
because it's Bible class. We sit round in a circle.
Yeah,
And
it's not just one brother leading.
At Bible class, in the discussions, sisters contribute. So that's fine. It didn't even occur to me that this was an issue. So I introduced her, Sister So-and-so, and another sister stood up and left. Now, this was an elderly sister, and I thought, I hope she's all right. And her husband soon followed her and thought, okay, good, he's gone to check she's okay. They didn't come back. So at the end, I'm like quite worried.
Yeah.
About, is she okay? It turns out she'd stormed off. Now, I will say, she was a very lovely lady, and she wrote me a very lovely letter afterwards, explaining why she'd done it and why she felt uncomfortable and stuff. And I apologized for making her uncomfortable and all of that, and we moved on. But I remember thinking, again, brother so-and-so, my age, from the conventional Christadelphian family, if he'd done that, she would not have got up and walked out. And that was, another one of those little chinks in the armor, and one of those knocks along the way is, am I at home here? Is this the place for me? So
it's also interesting, again, that it was a woman who left, who was enforcing it of like, no, this is inappropriate that a woman is speaking.
Yeah.
Instead of like a man being like, excuse me, you need to get back in your place and not ask a woman to speak. It was another woman who was like, I can't tolerate women having equal rights here and equal voice. I cannot handle it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I've gone to Nantwich Ecclesia, and I'm kind of I'm living two lives here, because I'm going along, and I'm still friends with my friends, but I'm friends with my university friends. And this is not to say that I'd gone hopelessly off the rails and, like I said, never done drugs. I've never been a massively excessive drinker. I wasn't massively sleeping around or anything like that.
But compared to a regular Christadelphian, it almost feels that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was discovering the world a little bit, and
which is
plus
normal.
as well, I was doing teacher training, which is pretty all-consuming and very full on and stuff. So I was finding it harder and harder. At Nantwich, we had a Sunday afternoon memorial service, which then we had tea, and then we had the evening one.
That's a long day.
And I was just finding I didn't have the time. Because I had assignments to do, I had classes to prepare for, and all of that. So it was it was slipping. And at 24, I graduated, went back, because at that point I was engaged. And I went back and I rejoined the Nolan Dorridge Ecclesia. It kind of made sense. And again, it was welcoming. It was, it was fine. It was comfortable. Most of the friends that I'd had there weren't there anymore. And they'd also graduated and settled somewhere else. But the lady that I was engaged to had a son from a previous relationship, and she hadn't been married, but she and she was not a Christadelphian. So we know where this is going. So
Yep.
now, I've got to be very fair. They were very welcoming to Michael, who was my stepson.
They came with you on Sundays most of the time?
Yeah, I started taking him on Sundays, and they were welcoming. There was an older brother there who always brought sweets to the meeting, and at the end of the meeting, because we'd the very little kids would go to creche somewhere else, but the older ones, sort of 5+ would sit at the back with activities, colouring in and that sort of thing while the meeting was going on. And they're very well behaved. And at the end, they would all flock to Uncle so-and-so and he'd give them sweets. And it was all very nice. They were very welcoming to him. Any time that I did bring my fiancée along, which wasn't very often because she wasn't. I was never under the illusion.
For another adult, I think, yeah.
And at that point, I'm not sure how hard I was trying, to be honest. I was never under the illusion she was going to join. But when she did come along to things, they were very kind and welcoming, and that wasn't a problem. So I'm starting my career, and that's again all consuming. I'm getting married. I got married 6 months after coming back from university, and I've got a ready-made family because I've got a little boy now. And it wasn't long before my ex-wife was pregnant with our first child, which was my daughter Jess. So Jess was born in January 2001. And by that stage, I'm really hanging on by a thread to being a Christadelphian. I've lost touch with quite a few people, including, some of the ones I've been really close to. By the power of Facebook, which was kind of the first social media I was involved in, I later on kind of reconnected with a lot of people, and that's been great. But at that time, not so much in touch with people. And I mentioned earlier about the first thing I was faced with when I first got baptized at a business meeting. And I said, there's some symmetry to that, because at Nolan Dorridge at that time when I rejoined, there was a couple, not the same couple, but there was a couple.
Can you imagine? We're still trying. 6 months wasn't enough to prove it.
They're following wherever I go because they know they'll get my vote. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's true.
No, different couple. Different situation. To be honest, I can't even remember exactly what the situation was, but it was the same sort of argument. And I remember one of the things that someone brought up who was on my side of the argument. We have a sign outside that says "All are welcome," and
I've seen those.
If we're not welcoming these people, we have to get rid of that. And there were passionate arguments. It wasn't as toxic as the one had been at Shirley. The atmosphere, people had too much respect for each other, and people were nicer, if I'm honest.
That's good to hear. That would be a great standard to have. Yep.
It was polarizing, and in
among
the
those
end,
who disagreed,
it didn't go the way that I felt it should go. Wow. And I'm there again thinking, what are we? Who are we to say? You can't come here, you can't break bread with us. And I know that at the time there were some personal things, because I didn't really know this couple. I knew the daughters, one of whom thought so much of it that she's now gone to live in America. But I didn't know them, but some of the people knew them and had history, and I felt that, and I was a bit more mature then, a bit more, not a lot more, at kind of 24, to be able to kind of understand a little more about the dynamics going on, and I knew that for some people it was a personal thing. They weren't applying scripture to this. They weren't, they didn't like the person, and that's fine. You don't have to like the person, but
that changes it. That's not
that
ethical.
Doesn't give you the right. So there we were. So that kind of was...
So they're just punishing someone that didn't fit in or that they didn't like,
Yeah.
it sounds like.
Yeah. So that was a big nail in the coffin. It wasn't the final one. My daughter was born January 2001, and that made me think as well, do I want this for her?
Mm-hmm.
And do I want this for my stepson?
Mm-hmm.
But then the final nail in the coffin was March 2001, when I would say as well, in fairness to Nolan Dorridge, when I got married, and I was marrying an alien, you know.
Yeah, the
I was
outsider.
unequally yoked.
You were very unequally yoked, yes.
I was. Yeah, even more than most, because I got a stepchild into the bargain. So yeah, very unequal. But Nolan Dorridge were okay about that. There were conversations, but there was never a suggestion that they were
never
going
a
to...
secret meeting.
Not to the best of my knowledge, but never a suggestion. I'm sure the AB's probably talked about it, but there was never a suggestion that I was going to be kicked out.
Okay.
And so, you know, I carried on attending. My friend Mark was also engaged to a non-Christadelphian, and he was from, well, he still is, he's from Newcastle, which is 200 miles away. Again, in the context of the UK, is a very big deal. The ecclesia that he was at the time didn't take the same view.
Ooh.
So he got married in March 2001, and not only did they disfellowship him, they chose his wedding day to put a letter through his door informing him that he was disfellowshipped.
That's
and
terrible.
At that point, I said, no, I'm not putting my name to this organisation. Now, it was hard, and people tried to make the argument to me that, yes, but you're at Nolan Dorridge, and we didn't do that, and we wouldn't do that.
Isn't that wild that they didn't? The inconsistency between what they're enforcing across different meetings? That's even more weird, you know?
Yeah.
It's all just up to the whim of the people that are there and what traditions they choose to enforce. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so arbitrary.
Yeah. So I was so angry.
Oh, I'd be so mad for him too. Yeah.
And
that's not cool.
He was cross. I think I was more cross than he was, because he was on his way out anyway. You know,
he probably saw it coming potentially too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he knew his ecclesia, and he knew.
Yeah.
But the hard thing for him was that his parents, and I believe at the time his sisters, were members of that ecclesia as well, so they
did
had
they
to
vote
kind
to
of
kick him I don't
know. I very much doubt it. I very much doubt
it.
I think I'm right in saying that his parents then moved to another ecclesia, and that ecclesia has now folded, and the meeting room is actually a mosque now. So that's karma,
interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, I at that point, no, that was it. And
talk about politics with meetings. This is drama.
I know.
All these votings and kicking people out and people moving and everything changing. Oh, goodness.
Hard time, because talking to Mum was the hardest thing, because
when
Dad
you were
was still
ready
at the
to leave?
Baptist church, and Dad's funny. Dad doesn't give much away in terms of emotions.
Like emotion, yeah.
Yeah. So that conversation with Mum, some of the other conversations as well, because there were some of the Noel and Dorridge Christadelphians that I wanted to make a point of telling them myself, and that was hard. And I remember I had a lot of invitations to come for a chat, which was nice. I declined most of them, but
was that before or after like anything official?
That was when I had made the decision and was about to put the letter in. And I think, maybe after I'd put the letter in, the phone started ringing then. So, this one couple who had, I'd been friends with their kids, and they'd always been absolutely lovely to me, and they asked me to come round for a chat, and of course I was going to do that. I thought I owe them that, and I just remember it being really, really sad, because these were great people, and I didn't want to let them down. But my mind was made up. I think also around that time, I'm getting. See, my mum will remember this better than I will because it.
Well, yes,
She's
she was
still
affected, I guess.
upset about it. She's deeply affected by it.
Aw,
But and our relationship's fine. This isn't one
that's
of those
good.
stories where the family have
You never know,
deserted me and
honestly.
so forth.
That's
Yeah, so Mum will remember the chronology better than me. I think I'd had a period where I'd stopped going, so I sort of did it in two phases.
oh,
Of
like to sneak out the back a little
I'm not
bit.
going to go, and that was a few weeks, I think, and then
Hmm.
I
Then you
put
made
the
the
letter in.
choice,
I
like,
think
up
what
publicly.
also
Yeah.
happened round about that time was my older sister, who had been a member of the Baptist church, and she'd since moved away and got married and was at another church, but she was visiting the parents, and she said to me, "I'm going to be going to Shirley Baptist Church. Do you want to come along?" And I thought, do you know what? Why not? Because at that point, although
Hmm.
I was pretty much done with Christadelphians, I still didn't know where I was, and
Hmm.
I still
Like, didn't have another
would
belief
have called
system or
myself a
anything.
believer at that point, and
Okay.
I was still praying quite a bit.
Hmm.
So I did. I went along, and I thought it was wonderful. And
Hmm. What was
I
different about that stuck out to you, if I can
it
ask? I've never been to a
was
Baptist meeting, so just
it
curious.
was everything that I had been asking for at the Christadelphian Church in
Oh,
terms of
really?
the modernization, and
Yep.
I mean it was a bit much at some points. The each to their own, and this isn't a criticism
Yeah.
of people, but in terms of for me, and it was a little bit kind of arm waving and laying hands on people and things like that, and
Some unusual things, yeah,
some
for
things
you.
that as a Christadelphian I just hadn't been used to.
Exposed to. Yeah.
I'd seen a little bit during Mum and Dad's experimental phase when I was younger, but I wasn't used to that. But
Yeah.
just the whole vibe, the relaxedness of it, looking around, seeing people sitting there in t-shirt and jeans. Oh yes,
Yeah. No
not a
suit.
hat to be seen. And yeah, I so that was a bit of a
Such a shock, it sounds like, I
yes,
bet.
it was, and a very welcome one. And so for
Mhm.
quite a long time, a number of years actually, I went along
Okay.
there with Dad, and I would say with that, it never entirely felt like home in the way that some of my Christadelphian churches had done in early
Well,
years.
did it have the same social closeness that people had in
Because at that
Christadelphia?
stage, you could see it among the younger people, and
Okay,
they were having a
yeah.
great time and
Who grew
stuff.
up in it, yeah.
But I was mid-20s then, with a family and a
Mhm.
demanding job. And
Yeah.
so I wouldn't criticize. I'd criticize myself as much as them for the fact that I was never really kind of at home because I didn't have as much to give, and they didn't have, that person when I went to CYC that first time who took hold of me and brought me in and made me love it. They
Mhm.
didn't
Yeah.
quite have that either. I
Mhm.
mean, they played soccer. There you go, soccer. So we're all on the same page.
Thank
They
you.
they played soccer once a week, and I went along to that, and that was great. Enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the services. But eventually, uh, again, Dad going full circle. Dad decided to rejoin the Christadelphians, um,
Oh my goodness.
and
That came out of left field.
it did. But I say that. And they're a very certain type of ecclesia now. So there's an ecclesia they go to in Birmingham, which is very progressive and very modern thinking. And
Hmm.
so I think, although there are obviously doctrinal things,
But there's some
the the
similarities, I
the
imagine,
difference
too.
in the vibe.
Yeah.
Um, there's not an awful lot of difference. The Christadelphian ecclesia they go to now is smaller than the Baptist church, but I think, and the lure of them being able to, in their twilight years, go to the same church together, I think
Yeah, I guess
that's
that's nice. It's easier for them.
that's
I
a
like
good
to
thing.
think that your dad just picks a meeting based on vibes. He's like, "Oh yeah, this one is good vibes. This is my religion now. Woo!"
Do you
Yeah,
know what?
they're a fun time.
Right, so dad's a much more intelligent man than I am. In fact, he's a much more intelligent man than most people I've ever met, and he he studies, and he,
Great fit for Christadelphians then, I
you
guess.
won't.
Like, they're all about that.
Well, this is the thing, and that was never my thing. I always found that so hard.
Yeah.
So I always found myself behind knowledge-wise. I couldn't hold
It's
an
funny to hear
argument
about
because
women who love that and then the guys who hate it and seeing it.
yeah, because I know you've talked about doing a lot of reading and so forth. I'm a
nerd. That's what I'm doing with this podcast. It's just an outlet for me.
I hated reading growing up,
Yeah.
which is a bit of a problem when you attend an organisation centred around a book. But
Yeah.
I've grown to enjoy reading now, but fiction and
Yeah,
autobiographies.
a little easier.
Not,
Yep. Yeah. I get it. Me too.
so-
I'm not going back to the Bible anytime soon.
Yeah. But I mean, I haven't even talked about the doctrinal issues that I had. Like, part of my issue as a Christadelphian, the whole thing about the nature of God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, and their makeup, and what they were, and what the relationship is, and how it works, I don't care.
It's very confusing.
I had my relationship with God and with Jesus, not so much with the Holy Spirit, because we didn't really talk about that in
that one's a little
Christadelphian
vague. Yeah.
But and what the actual mechanics of that are, what their skin is made of, or whatever, I don't need to know that. Even more so, right, and this would be a basis, if I'd said this out loud, this would be a basis for disfellowshipping me, right? I
Living
didn't
life
know
on
where
the
the
edge
kingdom
here.
was going to be. And I
I
didn't
thought it was
care.
in Jerusalem.
I don't care if it's on Earth or in heaven or on Saturn or whatever. It doesn't matter, because we've been told what it's going to be, and it's going to be wonderful. So who gives two hoots? But that was a red line. Whereas
Yeah.
you can have completely different opinions on how a marriage and divorce should work, and that's okay. We can still have fellowship together, but disagree on where the kingdom's going to be. I don't know. I didn't care enough about the things that seemed very, very important to some people.
Yeah.
So when Dad moved, because I'd been going to the Baptist church, I'd been bringing my kids along. That had been okay. By this point, my first marriage had broken down. I don't need an R from anybody, because I'm very, very happily remarried.
Wonderful.
But at that point, kids had been going along. Something happened in terms of the arrangements for access to my kids, and I couldn't then take them along every week. And basically, my ex moved a little bit further away. Again, 50 miles. So to you, nothing, but to us, a big deal. And so they couldn't do the midweek thing. And they I could see, I was watching them, they were getting that bit older. The kids at the church were all bonding over, like I had done years ago, over their midweek things, and they weren't part of it. And Dad had gone, and I sat the kids down and said, "What do you reckon? Do you want to stay part of this, or do you want to stop?" And they're great kids. They said, "Don't mind, whatever you want." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." You always do that. You always go along with things, and that's great. It's a really good quality. But on this one, have an opinion. And
make it yours.
They said, nah. The eldest, my stepson, had stopped anyway, because he was at an age to make his own decision, and he was enjoying the things that I wasn't enjoying at 16 plus, but and we were done, and that was it. And apart from weddings and funerals, I haven't been to a church since. So
very interesting. I love how unique every single story is. No one has the same build up to leaving. No one has the same final moment. It's so interesting to me. These have been so fun, and especially being our first UK guest. I don't know a name of any of those ecclesias. Those are all new to me. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Do you know what I've found now, though, with having like free Sundays?
Tell me.
Couple of things, right? First of all, I take my hat off to Christadelphians. I don't know how they do it. Like, especially any Christadelphians that are in teaching or any other job where you do have a bit of work to do at the weekend. I
Yeah, all that
don't
prep.
know how you fit it in. And you teach Sunday
Mm,
school and you run CYC on a Friday and you go to both the meetings on a Sunday. Sometimes you're
mm-hmm.
off at fraternals on a Saturday or whatever. Just
Yeah.
how do you do that? And the other thing is, right, since not being a Christadelphian in the last few years, I've learned how to cook a roast dinner. And I don't know if it's the same over there, but roast dinners are a very, very big part of a Christadelphian Sunday over here.
No, I'm
Um,
not aware of it. It sounds lovely and cozy,
right.
though.
I mean, that is something I missed. There was some fantastic, Auntie Jill's cauliflower cheese. My word, that was something.
Well, if
Um,
you got the recipe, we'll share it on the social media.
wow, I haven't. That's the trouble. But
Oh, no.
like, because when I do a roast dinner, it is an entire morning's work, right?
Yeah,
How
you
on
guys have stuff in the
earth,
oven, make your casseroles,
how
whatever,
on
grocery
earth
shopping.
did they go to the meeting? In some cases, teach Sunday school before the
Yeah,
meeting,
get the kids
and
ready.
yeah, and then come home, and within an hour, this beautiful roast dinner is out on the table with guests there, ready
Mm-hmm.
to share it.
To
So, I mean,
entertain, yeah.
hats off, sisters, and it certainly was mostly,
I'm
if not
sure,
always,
yeah.
sisters that were doing it.
Leading
But
that
yeah,
kitchen effort. Yep.
fair dues. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah,
The other
having your
thing
time back
is
is amazing now on Sundays.
that, yeah, this is it.
The
So
amount of time.
I do things with my Sunday. Sometimes I have a lion, and we have a dog. I walk the dog on a Sunday. I go
Yep.
running. I've discovered the NFL in the last few years. So
All right. Okay.
I
More
mean,
American
it's
sports.
it's probably my punishment for leaving Christadelphians is I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, and there's no misery like it. So
Oh, don't say that to my family.
yeah.
No, they will get
Yeah, no,
mad.
sorry. Perhaps I shouldn't have
Yeah.
said that. Um,
Yeah, I told you I was from near Philly, right?
oh no!
Ah!
Yeah, well, I'm afraid they've got all the. They're holding all the cards on that rivalry at the moment. So
I
there we
don't
go.
follow football personally, so I don't
No,
care. But yeah, I'm
yeah.
long aware of the rivalry.
When I was a Christadelphian, my love of soccer was a problem sometimes, and
I'm sorry that it's hurting you so much to say the word soccer. I can see it in your face every time.
right. If my friends could hear me, they'd be like, "What are you doing? It's football." Yeah.
You make
So
your face every time.
I support Watford FC, which is the town that I'm from. It's a small team. They're not,
Mm.
but it's one of the loves of my life. And
Okay.
always when we were away at a youth weekend, pre-internet, I had to find out the score, and that would get me into trouble. Like I've got to nip out, find a payphone. I've got to ring Dad, find out what the score is,
Wow.
and,
Yeah,
and
that
all
was
of this.
dedication there. You had to know.
Yeah, there was one time that Watford were playing locally in an away game to where I was, and it was our fraternal, and I snuck away for the afternoon to go and see them. And to be fair, nobody told me off, but I could feel the disapproving
Mm.
looks. And there was one time I think it was a youth weekend or something, and we're staying at a sister's house, and somehow someone might have said, "Oh, Mike's going to have to find out the Watford
The
score
score.
this afternoon," and it's got into this conversation of, well, I don't understand that when you've got the hope that we've got. Why? I didn't get into it, but I'm thinking on that basis. Why do you need a new car? Why do you need to go on holiday? Why do you
Why
need a
care about
promotion at work?
anything?
Why can't just let me have football? Um, so even though it does mostly make me miserable, let me have it. It's me. So it's
Yeah,
nice
it is
to
funny
be
though.
doing that guilt free as well.
Yeah, and it is interesting that I'm sure it kind of will pop up periodically, throughout the podcast, but it is interesting just the deprivation of like little things like that even that come along with the Christadelphian package, where everything in this life is kind of seen as less than or not good or, it's so worldly. So no matter what, you got to put it down, even if it's something that brings you joy, clearly,
Yep,
you know, just
sometimes.
have it. Yeah. There's no guarantees with sports.
Definitely not.
Did you want to talk at all about any experiences that you were aware of related to abuse in Christadelphian culture?
Yeah, well, So joining the Facebook group, and probably like most people when you first discover it, you're just trawling through the stories, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it's quite light-hearted, and a
There's a lot of
light-hearted
memes.
look back,
Yeah.
and all of that, and I enjoyed that. um, but you get to some proper trauma that people
Yeah.
have had,
Yep.
and I'm lucky. I'm not traumatized by being a Christadelphian.
Yeah, I'm seeing a pattern with some of the brothers.
Yeah. And it's fine and so forth.
Good for you. I'd rather people not be traumatized.
Yeah,
That's
definitely,
good.
definitely. But I was aware, and so when I was 15, there was a girl that I was friends with, not girlfriends.
Nothing
We weren't
romantic or
together,
anything. Yeah. Okay.
but someone I was friend with, and she confided in me, and the details of this I will take to my grave because
Of
that's what
course.
she told me to do. So that's fine. But
Yeah, and we don't reveal
uh,
revealing stuff on the podcast.
yeah,
We're not.
but she confided let's just say a very nasty encounter with a brother, an older brother,
Mm.
as in a Christadelphian
Mm.
brother, not her brother.
Hmm.
And that brother is relatively prominent in the community. His actual birth brother is very,
Thank you
very
for
prominent.
clarifying. It does get a little confusing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. He's very, very prominent, and
Yeah, like
I
that
think
family. Mm.
so that name will have been in her face quite a lot. And
Mm.
I regret. I don't know if this is a criticism of Christadelphians at the time or a criticism of the world at the time, because I know now, like through my work in school, um, safeguarding is everywhere, and what to do if, and who to talk to if, and we're here to help, and all of that.
Hmm.
Um, that
That
wasn't a
support
thing.
structure.
That
Yeah.
wasn't a thing in the school that I went to. That wasn't a thing in the ecclesias that I was in. So I know that she didn't report this.
I mean, I imagine she was also pretty young. If you were 15, you were
Yeah, she was.
friends.
She
I
was. She
imagine
was a
definitely a
similar age,
minor. Yeah.
and I regret being 15 when she told me, and just being a rabbit in the headlights. Not, if somebody told me that now, then um, I would have a good idea of how to support them, or certainly a much better idea than I had as a 15
Hmm.
year old. So that is a regret and something that stays with me. And that's really
Hmm.
the only encounter of anything like that I came across. But I recognize that, I'm here telling jolly stories about things and the great things that I've got as a result of being a Christadelphian, and that isn't everyone's experience.
Yeah.
Which is a great shame, and that's why the community on Facebook is
Hmm.
really good, because it has given some people an outlet, and it has connected people, and people have bravely told their stories on your
Yeah.
podcast. I want them to know that they have been heard, and
Hmm.
I'm sorry that a community that I was part of and a gender that I am part of was responsible for that. That's very, very sad.
Yeah. I would say, having grown up as a young woman, and a young woman in the Christadelphia, I think you got it from all directions.
Mm.
It started young. Like, the younger I was, the more sexual harassment I had in the world. Like, I remember by 12, we had to go to the police because of an incident that happened to a girl I was out with at the mall, and just a man, not Christadelphian or anything, who did something inappropriate. So your eyes are opened very quickly to sex-based violence as a young woman, and you don't get the freedom to enjoy the world as carefree and as protected as men do. And then, being Christadelphia, you begin to see that as well. And it's, again, the same culture, with some of its own twists on it, with the patriarchal norms that are set up, and the lack of support in a lot of ways. But it's both. It's out in society, you have to deal with it, and it's almost nice to get older and have less of that. It's unbelievable how vulnerable you are as a little girl, and that's when you have the most threat against you. I remember at 14, someone tried to get me in their car, like a man, grown man. And so you just realize, like, there's so much danger to little girls. And then a lot of men have a lot of power in Christadelphia, so there's certainly people who can use and abuse it. And I do hope that more things change, within that community so that people are more educated, just like we are seeing in society as a whole in general. Obviously, there's still a number of people who don't have any consequences or aren't learning to treat people better, especially, along gender lines. But I do hope that it continues to change, in the greater world and in the Christadelphian community for those women who are growing up in there, especially because I said I've really, just based on my experiences as being a young woman, I'm very much a strong advocate for the well-being and protection of young people and especially young women.
Yeah, it's really good that you and others are able to say that someone like you can say, do you know what, I'm going to take control of a microphone and I'm going to speak about this. And actually, Zinnia, do you know what I think would be really good is if somebody, maybe one of the other brilliant women that you've spoken to, actually did your story, and you
That's
got to be
actually
on
coming up. We've
the other side.
recorded it.
Oh, fantastic! Excellent.
It's gonna be coming out. Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say I want to hear it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely didn't want to lead with mine. Mine's heavy with the trauma, and I also don't want my story to be the dominant one because I am behind the microphone. I want to really make a community focused kind of podcast. And so I think I'm going to end the season with mine. And mine's also very, very long. And so it's going to be all right, well, enjoy our break, from the podcast. Whenever you've got an hour here and there, chip away at it. So, that's actually been recorded.
I'd say as well, as a man, there's nothing like having a daughter to focus your mind on certain things.
I'm sure it opens your eyes, yeah.
My daughter's a strong, independent young woman, but she's still vulnerable, as all women are, and it's that's a thing that, well, I live with the worry of that every day.
I'm sure,
but she has to live with that every day.
Yeah.
So.
And I do kind of love the irony of a woman running this podcast and highlighting so many women and being oh, you didn't want us to talk. Oh, you didn't want us at the platform to hear what we had to say. Well, guess what?
Here we are.
Boom. We got our own show. So it's I kind of love that it was me and not anyone could have done this. Anyone could have. Another ex-Christadelphian wants to make another podcast, go for it. I'm happy to promote, whatever. But it would be funny if it had been a guy where I'm I kind of like that it was a woman, just a little. I think there was one other thing that I just wanted to ask you about as the first person to be on the podcast from the UK. If there's anything you want to chat about it, but I've seen multiple articles on I think the Tidings website, and then a few people I think it's come up periodically in the Facebook group, but specifically for the UK about Iranian refugees and how it's changing ecclesias there. Do you know anything about that or want to share anything about it for people who aren't from the UK, who this is new to them or something?
A little bit. This wasn't a thing when I was a Christadelphian, but I hear it through mum and dad. And so there are, because, I mean, to set the scene, and again, we're not going to go down this path of discussing it, but similar to in the US, immigration is a big topic. and so forth. And actually, it's not largely Iranian populations that are dominating the immigration and dominating those that would complain about that sort of thing. It's not Iranians that are the main thing, but for some reason,
in the general. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people come from Pakistan and other Asian countries, but not Iran so much. At least not in my experience. And working in inner city schools, we work with a lot of
a lot of people come in.
immigrant children. So but for some reason, yes, the Iranians can't get enough of Christadelphia. So they've got the message and are on board.
And they're running with it.
There are. It sounds like a really interesting dynamic. There are bilingual meetings. Sometimes they do a bilingual meeting, as you're going along.
What's the other language?
I think it would be Farsi. I think that's the main, the main one.
Because I just don't know any Iranian people specifically to have a point of reference. Okay.
So say a line in English, say it in Farsi, and repeat.
Oh wow! The whole thing bilingual.
So, but
not imagine, 2 services.
Imagine those in here, like double length services. Goodness me. Um,
That's true.
yeah.
That would be tough.
I mean, I've had many a numb bottom sitting in meetings, and God, yeah. And sometimes they do a separate one, so they do the English version, and then they do the
That's what I
Iranian
was
version,
picturing,
and
just for
so forth.
practical reasons.
But in terms of fellowship, it's important in that community for people to get to know each other and all of this. So they're
Hmm. They're
and I
trying
think
to come together, I
again.
guess.
Again, politically, there's some hostility over here, and some people facing, particularly from the previous government, certain legislation that would potentially put their place here at risk. And
Ooh.
so, quite a lot of British Christadelphians have been involved in trying to help and support the Iranian ones in making their case to
Okay.
stay
To
here and get
stay. Okay.
citizenship or permanent residency and
Very
so on. So,
political, but very
yeah,
nice too. That seems like a
yeah,
good thing for people.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean that's as much as I know.
Okay.
Really, I don't know how that started or why it's taken off in such a big way with that community in particular.
Yeah, it seems
I don't
very
know.
specific. It was just, I keep hearing like Iranian refugees, and I was like, that's unusual. It's very specific. I mean, we never had anything like that in America. I don't remember any particular group of
No,
immigrants coming in. It
no.
was very, very white American. And then you had your visiting Canadians, Australians, all the big
Yep.
countries.
And in my time as a Christadelphian, very similar, very, very similar. So
Yeah. Okay.
I would just say there was a there was a question that you asked about if there's any kind of books or anything that you would recommend as
Oh yeah, I love to ask
someone.
people if they have anything they would recommend to someone who's
Yeah.
leaving. Yep.
So as I've said, I'm not a big reader of I'm not a big student of these things. So this
Okay.
is very we would say over here lowbrow in terms of your intellectual capacity for enjoying this. It's minimal, but okay. Don't go to this with any current Christadelphians or other religious people. Don't go with your parents. Go with people, and don't go if you are at all sensitive about certain issues. But honestly, I have never laughed so much, and it really resonated. Go and see the Book of Mormon at the theatre. It is
I just had a friend go see that a few weeks ago and recommend it. I know.
Oh my goodness, it is
I haven't
honestly
seen it,
my
but I'd love
insides
to.
hurt. I laughed so much. But yeah, and it obviously it's about Mormons, and it's it's very, very comedic.
And I'm
Some
sure a
of
bit
it,
irreverent.
just a little bit, yes, with some language in it that I wouldn't want my mum to hear. But
Probably right up my alley then. I've got the sailor's mouth.
oh, by the way, can I just say, right. So I don't know who's going to end up listening to this. I in my daily life, I do tend to swear quite a bit, so I've been trying very, very hard not to in this, just in case of who might be listening. So yeah, but if you're not easily offended, go and see Book of Mormon. It's it'll take you back in a way to some aspects of Christadelphia, but honestly, it's just so funny. And one more thing, because I need to shut up and go and watch NFL. But one more thing. There's years after I'd left, there's a colleague and a friend that I work with, have worked with for a number of years. And I was talking to her one day, how's your daughter doing and all this. And she said, I'm a little bit worried. I said, okay. I was like, now this is not a religious person at all. This is someone who enjoys life the right way. But she said, yeah, I'm a little bit worried about my eldest. And I said, okay, yeah, what's up? Is she okay? She said, yeah, she's got engaged to her boyfriend. I said, okay, do you not like him? She said, it's not that I don't like him. She said, he's... Do you know where this is going? She said,
he's religious?
He's not just religious. He's part of a religious group. I said, oh, okay. Like a cult or something. She says, I don't know. I said, okay, what group is it? She said, he's a Christadelphian. And I said, oh, you'd better come and sit down. and we talked. And a couple of weeks.
And now you can just send her the podcast, be like, here you go.
Yes, yeah, I probably
Some
will.
things to know.
A couple of weeks after that, she said,
did you know the guy?
Yeah, I did, because it was... well, I didn't know him, but I knew his parents.
But like his name, his family.
His parents were like
it's a small group in general.
They're from Shirley Ecclesia, where
there
I
you
went.
Go.
So
Yep.
I knew his parents. I said, yeah, okay. Well, don't worry. It's not, yeah. I left it and I have issues with it, but she's not getting drawn into some kind of and a couple of weeks later, she said, so I've got to go to my daughter's baptism. I'm like, oh, okay.
They got her. They got her.
I said,
they had to be equally yoked.
I know. I said, have you got a hat? She said, yeah, I've been told I've got to wear a hat. I'm like, okay. Anyway, fast forward. It didn't pan out. The engagement broke off, and the Christadelphian membership very quickly broke off after that as well. So she's back among the heathens. It was short-lived, but we've had a good chuckle about that and about her experience.
Well, she can come on the podcast now
and tell her tell her 3-month story. Yeah, I'll see if she wants to do that.
Can you imagine the shortest one? Be like, "Yep, we'll be done this interview in 20 minutes." Just I met this guy. I took a class every Monday night, and then we broke up, and I never went back.
Yep, that's about it.
Welcome to the group.
Yep.
Wow, love it. Love the story. Whoa, that was a ride. Small world for such a you're living in these big cities, all this stuff, and then coming across again just the little Christadelphians just out there. That is wild.
Yeah, I think this was the case back in the day. Birmingham, UK, is kind of the capital city of Christadelphia.
Yeah, unofficially,
is over
officially.
Here. It's where
it's because it's where the magazine is. That's where Robert Roberts set up the capital to be.
I mean, we won't go into this now because people will have had enough, but I actually worked at that office for a few weeks during one summer when I was...
oh, you mean the magazine office?
I was at school. Yeah. It was all right, actually.
Did you ever come across a lump of beard hair by any chance?
I did not, no. Well, not that it wasn't attached to someone's face anyway.
I want unattached. Pure white, grizzled from the 1800s, just checking in.
No, I didn't. I got in trouble one day because one of my tasks when I was there was I had to build some furniture, and there was, because for all their archives and everything, and it was like this metal kind of stack. And I got a permanent marker and wrote on the side Mike and the date, which I don't know. It was like August 1991. I know, and I've often wondered if that's
could have been
still
worse.
there.
There was worse graffiti when I was in school.
Definitely.
Do
people still go in there and think, I wonder who Mike is? Or at the time, the editor of the Christadelphian was Brother Mike Ashton, and I wonder if they think, I wonder why he's wrote his name on the stack. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it really looks like you framed him with your vandalism.
Yeah.
Oh, if you have any stories about the Christadelphian Magazine that you want to share at some point, even if it's not now, I'd be curious if there was anything interesting that came about from that, because I've never been to the UK. Who knows if I ever will. If they ever wanted to bring me there, I'd love to look at the archive, honestly. But I'm just curious about it. Generally, as someone who's interested in history, and that being like the epicenter of it.
Well, you would find a lot there, and it's a shame that they haven't kind of put all that material online, or at least they haven't, as far as I know. Because for your true crime episodes, then that would help, kind of piece together. Oh, so were they kicked out of the meeting after they did that, and all of that?
There's probably some interesting records. Yeah,
but they just had piles and piles and piles of old magazines that were there, kind of.
Well, that stuff's at least been digitized. I know the magazines are online. Some of it's behind a paywall. Some through whatever means. There's some that's publicly
Right.
accessible.
Mm.
Um,
And
I'm
mine
more
will be there
interested about the other
somewhere with
stuff.
mine will be there somewhere with the wrong date of my baptism in it. So
Yeah,
you can find that
forever.
one out.
Well, now we know the true story of when Mike got baptized. Only
Yes,
here on the
it's on
Life After
record
Leaving
now.
podcast. Wow, you really just snuck that in there at the end. You're like, oh, by
Yeah.
the way, I worked in the Capitol. I should have started with that because when you said Birmingham, but you keep talking about all these random towns everywhere else. So we
Yeah,
didn't
I
even
know.
talk about Birmingham.
Yeah. Well, most of them were around Birmingham. There's like, I don't know, 30 or 40 Birmingham ecclesias back then.
That's
I don't know
incredible
if
how
they're
much
all
there
still
is.
there. So,
Because they really started with nothing when you look at the history. Like,
yeah.
he basically told Robert Roberts start from scratch there. It wasn't like there was a huge ecclesia. There was very few, is my understanding.
My grandpa wrote some books, and the first couple, they were published by the Christadelphian office, but then one of them was withdrawn from sale because I can't even remember why it was, but there was something in it that
Some doctrine
it
that
was about.
wasn't
It was a
kosher.
book about James, and there was something in it that people objected to, so it was taken off sale. And that was that my grandpa was, well, he was all right, but he a bit cross about that. But anyway, while I was working there, I found the box out the back of all the copies of Grandpa's book. So
they were there.
So they were still there, but just
but
not
they
on sale.
refused to sell them or donate them. They're like, the world can never see this book.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Poor Grandpa, though. I feel a little bad for him. He put all that work into it just for his community.
He did. Yeah, the rest of his, but he wrote about 6 or 7, I think, and the rest of them after that he published himself. And
wow, that burned that bridge.
Did that. So yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. This was so much fun. You had some fantastic stories. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
all of
Yeah, I've
those
really
so
enjoyed that.
openly.
It's been quite cathartic to talk about. It's probably the first time I've ever kind of sat down and just kind of gone through the journey like that. So
yeah.
So, yeah.
This is very unique. And I mean, we get bits of it on the ex-Christadelphian Facebook group where someone will talk about a specific situation often that's, going on or had been going on that they want to get some catharsis on. But a lot of people have been saying that this is just so unique to have our own little community where we understand what each other are saying and can kind of connect over it and release that a little bit and hopefully help other people, because it's such a unique experience leaving. It's such a unique experience growing up in it. So even though this podcast is really geared towards like a very, very, very small group of people in the world, it's meaningful for them nonetheless. And it's been fun to do and meet all these wonderful people from all over the world. So again, thank you for taking the time out of your weekend, of your precious Sunday, which we now have reclaimed, to come on the podcast.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed that, Zinnia. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks again for joining us on the Life After Leaving podcast, and stay tuned for some more fun future episodes. Bye, everyone. Thank you to everyone who has helped make this episode of the podcast possible. Today's episode was edited by me, Zinnia. I'd also like to thank Al Kroons for creating our intro music and the ex-Christadelphians that submitted audio for the intro music. If you'd like to join our community, you can find us at the group for ex-Christadelphians on Facebook. You can also follow our social media on Facebook and Instagram at LifeAfterLeavingPodcast. If you'd like to come on the podcast, reach out to me at lifeafterleavingpodcast@gmail.com. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a rating and review or sharing this podcast with a friend. That's all for today. Thanks, and see you next time.